So in 2013, so at this point it's almost been 7 years ago, I survived a high-level spinal cord injury and head injury, which left me paralyzed from the neck down, from here. I was in a pretty terrible bike accident that was a head-on collision on one of the bike paths here in Boulder, Colorado. And that accident caused me to hit a wall with my head, which then caused the disc here at C5-6 to crush my spine and left me paralyzed on the spot. And very lucky that it did not sever my spine. It just badly bruised and crushed the spinal column. So I'm incredibly blessed and lucky because it was a very close call. So I did go into emergency surgery where they removed that disc, they put in a prosthetic, and then they fused the spine together. And after that, I began the incredible, difficult, and slow recovery process. So I was in the hospital for a little over 3 weeks, I think, altogether. I was in the ICU for about 2 weeks after that surgery, and dealing with spinal shock and a host of other things, and then moved to inpatient rehab for a little over a week, which then after that I moved into outpatient rehab, which was a little over 2 years. Some of the therapies I needed longer than others. The first thing that I started to regain was a little bit of movement in my feet and then in my legs, and then slowly began to work on standing again and walking again. What came a little bit later for me was the use of my arms and hands. And then even later than that, like over 2 years later, I regained my ability to sense hot and cold and different sensations on my skin. I had dead zones, and I was registering hot and cold in a way that doesn't make sense. And continued to work even still and probably forever on the deep core strength and functioning of my real deep muscles internally. So in my experience, I was blessed with incredible healthcare providers of all kinds, an incredible surgeon, team of doctors, the amazing nurses that helped me. I had every kind of therapy, I think, that there is: physical therapy, occupational therapy, cognitive therapy, PTSD therapy, and really was deep in this experience of trauma and of shock trauma in particular, and the recovery process of that. So after a couple of years of just survival, just that acute recovery phase, once I really began to get my feet back under me, so to speak, I recognized that I sort of shifted. I started to go into what I now see as like a secondary level of recovery, where I began the emotional and spiritual journey, the emotional and spiritual recovery from that experience for myself. The trauma had left me somewhat fragmented and dealing with depression and anxiety and, in some ways like an existential crisis. I started to, it just was, I was absolutely no longer who I had been before, but I wasn't sure who I was now or what this whole experience meant for where I was headed in my life. And Yeah, it makes me emotional. I mean, it's big stuff, but I'm so grateful to have the chance to talk about it. Um, I started asking some pretty big questions about life, myself, the whole nature of everything, the whole point of everything. And I became acutely aware of both the preciousness of life and of these bodies and the fragility of it. And, I was just asking these huge questions about who am I, and what does this mean for me, and what is the meaning of all of this? What is the meaning of life, and how do I allow this to transform me in the way that it wants to? And I had been seeing a fantastic therapist at the time, which was so helpful on so many levels, and I needed something more. I needed something different. I needed to explore these questions and find integration for myself, find some meaning for myself out of it all. So I began to guide myself, and I did that through nature, through my connection with nature. I took myself out into these ceremonial wanders with the land, and really tried to investigate my story and my experience from different lenses, and worked with myself through my own healing, guided myself through my own healing on that secondary level, that emotional and spiritual level. And that kind of leads me to where I started to realize that part of the meaning for this all for me is to have the opportunity to guide others through that, to lend a hand and be a support to others who are experiencing something similar, who have arrived at that place of having survived something tremendous and difficult, and need to understand it better, need to integrate, need to find their new sense of self, need to reconnect with their innate wisdom, their innate strength, and need to move through it so that they can move forward and not stay stuck in that spiral that happens, the spiral that the nervous system gets caught in when we are going through trauma, and the spiral that our emotions get caught in when we've been through something big like that, and we need to let it change us.